We want to begin tonight in Afghanistan and the fallout 24 hours after that horrific suicide bombing. Tonight, we're beginning to learn the names, see the faces, and understand the heroism of the 13 fallen service members. Navy medic Max Soviak from Ohio. He graduated from high school in 2017. His mother telling ABC News he was very proud to serve his country. Marine Riley McCollum from just outside Jackson, Wyoming. Marine Kareem Nikoe, his father saying he loved what he was doing. He always wanted to be a Marine. And Marine David Espinoza from Laredo, Texas, a 2019 high school graduate. And Marine Hunter Lopez from California. Those who knew him saying being a Marine to Hunter wasn't a job, it was a calling. Some of those who died would have been too young to remember 9/11 and the start of the war in Afghanistan. President Biden today acknowledging their bravery and their sacrifice by calling this a worthy mission, saying we will complete it. It's a mission that's getting increasingly perilous, however. National security officials saying these final 4 days before the deadline will be the most dangerous yet, and that another attack is likely. Tonight, we know roughly 500 Americans are left behind, but can the government get all of them out, as well as more Afghan allies? Our Ian Pannell leads us off tonight.
Tonight, continuing chaos and danger at Kabul airport. Flashbang grenades fired to disperse increasingly desperate crowds as the urgency grows to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies from the country. Planes departing throughout the day as hundreds of people again swarm the airport, hoping to get out in the next 4 days. The Taliban using military vehicles to block some of the roads leading to airfield gates. The morning's begun for those killed in the deadly attack at Abbey Gate. 13 American service members and 170 Afghans lost their lives, 200 wounded. President Biden warned today by his national security team that another terror attack in Kabul is likely, calling the threat specific and active, and saying the next few days will be the most dangerous period to date.
They are taking maximum force protection measures at the Kabul airport and in the surrounding areas with our forces.
But today, the president insisting that evacuation flights will continue.
Our hearts go out to all those who we've lost. But look, the mission there being performed is dangerous, and it's now it's come with a significant loss of American personnel. And but it's a worthy mission.
The Pentagon now revealing new details about what happened in the deadly suicide blast. The attack launched at 5:48 p.m. local time, immediately followed by gunfire from an unknown location. The military now clarifying only one explosion took place, not two, as initially reported. The Pentagon adding they're not sure how many service members died from the blast and how many from the gunfire, but revealing there were 11 Marines, 1 Navy medic and 1 Army soldier among the fallen. And tonight, we're starting to learn the identities of the Americans killed, including Navy medic Max Soviak of Ohio and Marines Riley McCollum of Wyoming, Kareem Nikoe and Hunter Lopez of California, and David Lee Espinoza of Texas. 18 Americans also wounded in the attack, some medevac to Germany in special surgical units inside C-17 planes. But questions remain on just how this attack took place, with the Pentagon scrutinizing Taliban checkpoints.
If they were able to get up to the Marines at the screening at the entry point of the base, there's a failure somewhere. It was a failure by, the Taliban operate with varying degrees of competence. Some of those guys are very scrupulously good, some of them are not.
A photo from this week reveals just how dense the checkpoints can be. Dozens of service members within arm's length of those trying to get in.
This is close-up work. The breath of the person you are searching is upon you.
The president vowing to punish ISIS in Afghanistan, the group behind the attack.
We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay.
ISIS-K is made up of disaffected Taliban and foreign fighters, but they're the sworn enemy of the Taliban. Even so, hundreds of them escaped from prison as the Taliban released their own fighters during the rapid takeover of the country. In Washington, criticism mounting on the Biden administration for its handling of the evacuation, amid reports that American identities were shared with the Taliban in an effort to expedite their evacuation from the country. Leading Republicans now demanding answers, but the State Department denying it's been done in a way that exposes anyone to additional risk. But as the backlash intensifies, the airlift goes on. Officials reporting just over 4,000 evacuated from the country in the past 12 hours, the lowest figure in a week. The State Department saying they're working another 500 Americans who still want to leave.
We will be able to fly out evacuees right up until the last moment. That's going to be the goal.
Today in Afghanistan, the U.S. striking back, delivering on the promise of retaliation for a suicide bombing at Kabul airport 48 hours earlier. That left at least 169 dead, according to the Associated Press, including 13 U.S. servicemen. The target, an ISIS-K fighter believed to be involved in planning future terror attacks, according to 2 U.S. defense officials. He was riding in a vehicle in the Nangarhar province in eastern Afghanistan, once an ISIS stronghold. The weapon of choice, an NQ-9 Reaper drone. A CENTCOM spokesman said the target is believed to have been killed with no known civilian casualties. But U.S. intelligence agencies fear that ISIS-K may strike again. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul again yesterday, warning U.S. citizens to avoid traveling to the airport and to avoid airport gates. Despite those warnings, evacuations are still racing ahead. There are still Americans in Kabul desperate to get out before the U.S. deadline to finally leave Afghanistan on Tuesday.
And next tonight, to a major threat brewing in the Gulf of Mexico, Hurricane Ida could make landfall in Louisiana as a major hurricane as soon as Sunday. So let's bring in our senior meteorologist, Rob Marciano. Rob, time this out for us.
Well, Juju, it's rapidly approaching the coastline. This thing has really only been on a radar for a few days, and it's already a hurricane lashing into western Cuba. Let's take a look at it. It's getting a little bit banged up with the land interaction there, but once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it's all systems go. This thing is likely going to rapidly intensify. That's the warning out of the National Hurricane Center. That's what our computer models are saying. So many of them are not only saying it's going to rapidly intensify, but take this track, which brings it to the coastline of southeast Louisiana Sunday afternoon as a Category 4 storm with 140-mile-per-hour winds. Of course, hurricane warnings have been posted from just west of Lafayette to the Mississippi-Louisiana border. And this is going to have, when you're talking about Cat 4, you're talking about big-time winds that will be damaging winds. We saw that with Hurricane Laura in southwest Louisiana last year. And we're also dealing with a big-time surge, 10 to 15 feet in that area. And if you're outside the levee system, I mean, they're telling people to evacuate right now. Inside the levee system, you'll be tested with that sort of surge, and also going to be tested with the amount of rainfall coming in with this, 10 to 20 inches of rainfall near New Orleans, and that sort of rainfall is what the city can handle. This is going to come in potentially on the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, Juju. This is a much different track than Katrina. Actually, it's a much worse track for New Orleans, theoretically. So we're just going to have to see what happens. I know they're rushing to prepare for this as it quickly comes to the coast.
And that's ironic. Everybody has Katrina front of mind as this storm barrels down. But what has you most concerned as you eye this particular storm track?
Well, you know, for one thing, you know, we've all rightfully been distracted with the other headlines in the news. So this hasn't been on the radar of the public really for as long as a lot of hurricanes are, and it's quickly moving to the coast, and it's going to rapidly intensify. It's one of these things that's been a Cat 3, Cat 4 for days. So I'm not sure everybody is aware. I'm not sure everybody's ready to get out, and I hope that they will be able to get out if they're told to do that tomorrow. So that's concern number one. Concern number two is when you're talking about a Cat 4, I saw it in Lake Charles last year. Some of the infrastructure and buildings in this part of Louisiana cannot withstand 140, 150 mile-per-hour winds, and it looks like that's what's going to happen. So we're talking about widespread damage as if a large tornado would be coming through. I want to show you this one graphic, which gives you an idea of how goosed the water temperatures are. 2 to 3 to 4 degrees above average in this part of the Gulf of Mexico, and that is just fuel for the fire. Obviously, climate change in this case is amplifying this storm, and that's a bit of a frightening scenario for southeast Louisiana, Juju.
It's been 58 years since Martin Luther King led the historic March on Washington. And this weekend, thousands are expected to attend marches across the country, including in our nation's capital, to demand more action to expand voting rights. And for more on this, I'm joined by NAACP President Derek Johnson, whose organization, you may know, recently launched a national campaign to combat voter suppression. Thanks so much for joining us, Derek.
Thank you.
We know you wrote an op-ed in USA Today earlier this week emphasizing that voting rights should not be a partisan issue, and yet the reality is it very much is. The House recently passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act this week along party lines, but it faces an uphill climb in the Senate. Are the numbers just not there to get these bills to President Biden's desk?
Well, we'll need 50 members of the Senate to support protection of our voting rights. We should not allow a procedural rule that was used by segregationists to impede our democracy. And that's what we're up against now. With NAACP, we're saying that there are 50 senators in the United States Senate to pass this legislation. It's not about partisanship. It is about our democracy.
And yet, given that Democrats are struggling to find a path forward on enough votes in the Senate on legislation, what's the end goal for the protests this weekend? What's the message?
Well, it is continue the heightened urgency to make sure that this is a priority. If members of the Senate can come together and pass a $3+ trillion package, surely they can pass legislation to protect the right to vote. This is not about one community. This is about our democracy. We're looking at the collapse of that took place in Afghanistan. We send young people abroad to fight for this democracy. Surely we can pass legislation to protect it here on our home front.
You're well aware, Derek, that while President Biden has previously called the pair of voting rights bills in Congress a national imperative, he hasn't seemed to make it a big administration priority, with issues like infrastructure, as you mentioned, and Afghanistan dominating the White House's time right now. Do you believe that the president has done enough on this issue, or is there a lack of political will or urgency from this administration?
But for us, we're looking at this one body at a time. The houses have done their job. Now it's for the Senate to do their job. And once the Senate do their job, we're looking for the president to sign this legislation. So we're really focused on the outcome, not the words, not the statements of support, but an outcome to ensure all Americans can go to the polls, cast an effective ballot, and that we do away with political gerrymandering, which is so important to ensure that our voices can be heard across this country and have a true representative democracy.
And so, speaking of words, have you had any recent conversations with President Biden or his team on efforts on voting rights? And if so, what's the message?
Well, my message has been consistent. We are in ongoing communication with both the leader of the Senate, the administration, and our message is very clear. Pass this legislation. There are no other options. The sense of urgency needs to be there, and we're going to keep pushing. We will have people on the ground, and while they're on recess, we'll have people in D.C. when they come back in September, because there is nothing more vital in this moment than ensuring that all Americans can exercise their right to vote.
One of the details that stands out in your op-ed is the number of bills that have been introduced by state legislatures, making voting rights in this country more difficult. So far, you pointed to at least 17 Republican-led state legislatures passing voting restrictions in recent months. Given the pace at which Republicans are moving on these bills, are Democrats running out of time to address this before the 2022 midterms?
Well, it's unfortunate that elected officials are trying to select their voters. In a democracy, voters select those who represent them, not the other way around. And we are pressing the sense of urgency of members of Congress to do their job. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue to ensure that we have elections that are fair, that are transparent, that are inclusive, so all legitimate citizens can fully participate in the electoral process. And that's all we're asking for. This is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is an issue about America. It's a moral obligation to protect our Constitution.
And I want to get your reaction to another question brewing in the nation's capital today. In the headlines, the Supreme Court ruling to suspend the CDC's nationwide eviction moratorium. Congressman Cori Bush, who led a protest that successfully led to the administration taking action to extend that moratorium, said in a statement today that the Black and brown communities, and especially Black women, will bear the brunt of this decision. Your reaction?
You know, Congresswoman Cori Bush is speaking from a personal experience. It is unfortunate in the midst of a current homelessness crisis that we are witnessing in this country, something that's been building up for several years, is going to be compounded by individuals being evicted. We must have a permanent solution to the ability of individuals to be in housing. That's important. When you go to Los Angeles and you see the level of homelessness, you go to Seattle, Washington, or you name the metropolitan area, you see the cross-section of loss of opportunity, the lack of job opportunity, the need for mental health support, and young children who are living in cars and in tents. It is a national disgrace. We must address the issue of homelessness. We must address the housing crisis as it has confronted this nation for several years now.
Derek Johnson, president of the NAACP, thank you so much for your time.